Darren Kwasniewski here with Aquitas Solutions. We've started a new video series where we're going to share our experience and knowledge related to maybe some more obscure applications that our customers have maybe not seen before or had exposure to. A lot of times our customer base has reached a point of maturity when it comes to standard Maximo capabilities. They've done purchase orders, they've done PMs, they've done job plans, they've done work orders, but they're looking for a way to take advantage of more capabilities in the product, potentially even consolidate applications and reduce the number of applications they need to maintain and support. And that's really what this video series is driven around. So today's topic is going to be around the incident and investigation application. Now, they do act independently as two separate applications. You would report an incident, and then if it required investigation, you would go through a related investigation. That works well for a lot of customers, especially customers that have the different departments within their organization to handle the ability to, again, report an incident, but then investigate in a different format. Sometimes our customers are really lean. They don't have that overhead. They have maybe one person that manages all this. So you do have the ability to take the investigation capability and combine it with an incident. So an incident reaches a certain status of maybe pending investigation, and then you would actually do the investigation right within the incident itself. So traditional, typical Maximo flexibility. You can kind of set it up how you want it to work best for your organization. So what I would do in this presentation is focus on the capabilities and ignore the ones that aren't really relevant to your business needs, and then think about how you would leverage the ones that are. So we're going to first talk about incident because that's really the starting point. We need to get an incident into the system. So within the Maximo application, there are a number of ways to report an incident. I'll show you a couple and I'll mention a couple. So the first one I'm going to get into is under self-service applications. This is where Maximo's traditional zero user license self-service apps exist. So if I wanted to request parts, if I wanted to report a service incident, but you'll also notice there is incident oil. And this is where I can actually create an incident in the system. So what it's designed to do is be very strategically specific to the incident application of Maximo. But it's meant to be simple, easy to use. You're more or less kind of following the formula, the recipe, and answering the question. So it says what happened. Affected date, I can change it. It wants to know what happened. So I will say, well, there was a fire. What was the category of the fire? It was a minor fire, but I still want to report it. And then I would put in my summary details of minor fire at whatever location, and those details would be in the system. You'll notice there is a safety observation component, and this is really important for our customers. If they note something as an observation, safety observation becomes a required field, and that's because now I need to categorize what type of observation that was. So we'll say an unsafe act, and I'll say that contractors on site without PPE, for example. So it really becomes an application that everyone can have access to and start reporting either observations. So it sort of becomes an app that everyone has and everyone becomes eyes on the ground when it comes to safety anomalies. Or it can be an application where I actually reported the incident that happened. It also wants to know what else happened. So sometimes the incidents don't happen in solitude. There'll be other related incidents or events. So I could also say where there was an injury. Due to the fire, there was also an injury, and I need a secondary event category. This was a minor injury as well, and then I can manage that. It would want to know if there's any attachments. Then it wants to know where did it happen. So I would put in information on asset location or just street address if it was not part of the Maximo asset location concept. I also can introduce people involved, so I'll just pick a person here. This person was involved. What was their role? These roles do have an impact. We'll get into those when we actually look at the incident, but I'll just say that this was the primary person involved. And then it wants to know what you do about it. What actions did you take? So I'll say, well, I put up warnings in vicinity. We put up warnings, signs, and blocked area, for example. And then I could submit that incident to the system. So it really becomes a very simple, follow the prompts way to report an incident. Another way to report an incident is when you're using the health and safety work order application and you're in a work order. I'll just bring up any work order here. And let's say while working, an incident occurs. Well, what I can do is I can create an incident right from the work order. So it becomes a related record to the work order. And I would see that there is a related follow-up incident. And then obviously I would put in details on what that incident was. So you'll start to see kind of this transparency concept that becomes evident. You're really able to follow the life cycle. And that's a lot of times where the value of putting your incidents in Maximo, especially when they're operational or maintenance related, is you have that transparency through the life cycle. When we go through the story, you'll see that often the result of an investigation is other work orders, new training, update the way the safety guards are installed on equipment. So it kind of becomes full circle when it comes to the life cycle of an incident. So again, that's where the value sort of comes in. So one more thing we'll talk about incidents is we'll just go to the incident application. So all other formats, whether it's self-service or whether through a work order, end up with an incident record in Maximo. So this would be now what the incident person would see. They'd be able to see anything that was reported that they needed to acknowledge, kind of like any type of help desk type situation. The incident is based on the ticket. So you'll notice a lot of commonality on assigning ownership and escalating and priorities. And, for example, this one is queued up, so it hasn't been resolved yet. All that becomes part and parcel of how the incident app works. So let's go look at an existing incident. I see that there was a vehicular incident, vehicle accident, pedestrian contract. One of our service vehicles clipped a pedestrian at an unmarked location, minor contact, but still needs to be reported. We see that it was an incident type of vehicle. It was minor. We know the address and street that this happened at. We also know who reported it, who was affected, who it was reported to. We understand, this might happen over the life cycle of the incident, but we would determine whether it was reportable or not. Probably in this scenario would be asset location. These probably don't make any sense for the type of story we're telling, but if it was relevant, you would be able to associate it with an asset or location in Maximo. The action taken, so safety blockages, safety guards were put in place. There was a medical claim reference number. Again, we might not have this at the point of creating the incident, but over the life cycle of the incident, we do want to capture this. We see the people impacted. We see whether they were injured. This person might have been a witness. We can categorize. And that's important because if a person is a witness, we'll see a certain kind of information we're trying to capture versus if they're the ill person. If I expand on that, it actually wants to get into details on which part of their body was injured, their return to work status, if they were temporarily reassigned. All that information is captured in Maximo. It does feed some OSHA reporting default reports that we provide with the system. So once this data is calculated and captured, it automatically populates those reports for you. Any attachments? What IBM's trying to do is make sure it relates and references all other applications. So if we want to do a hazard assessment or a risk assessment associated with this, maybe we've already got a risk assessment for driving company vehicles and this still happened. Maybe we need to go back and look at the risk assessment and understand if there's anything missing. So again, it's about transparency, visibility. We can understand whether this is a local incident or maybe this becomes regional. We need to apply whatever the outcome is to multiple locations or people. All that can be captured. Date times, pretty standard in Maximo, and then whether multiple assets and locations are impacted. So that kind of becomes the high level. We really didn't add too much more here than the person entering the incident would have recorded, but we probably would take a call or get on the phone with them and say, give me a little bit more detail on what happened so I can make sure that this incident report is fully populated. You'll notice too here that there are other incident events. So the sample that we created, we also said there was an injury. This one is saying there was also damage and an injury based on the vehicle incident. So there are secondary events that might need to be managed separately, but we can capture those all within one incident. Sequence of events. So this is getting pretty specific. I don't see a lot of customers using this, but the capability does exist. And what it's saying is what exactly happened, time, date, relevant to the incident, the way it occurred. So maybe we got a call from the driver when it happened. Maybe we had notification when the driver had left the primary location before this happened. It gives us some sequencing and some information relevant to what might have led up to the event. We could obviously pull data from a data historian or some type of operational control system. So let's say it was an explosion or a fire or a release. We could start monitoring, when we saw a deep pressure, when we saw a valve open, when an actuator kicked in and made a change to a status of something. All that context and detail potentially could give us more insight into the incident. Again, I don't see it a lot, but the capability is there. Activities, again, kind of going further here. I'm getting a lot more specific. So you can actually start capturing true costs of the incident. So not only do we know that the incident happened, we know that we spent 2 hours doing site remediation, cleaning up the antifreeze and oil that spilled, whatever it happened to be. All those costs get captured. So we're actually getting specific true cost capture related to an incident. And again, I don't see it a lot, but the capability does exist. We'll go to log entry is pretty typical in Maximo. We call the insurance company, we keep a note. If it was sent via email, we'd have that communication log. Service address shows you where it happened. High context gets really specific into using kind of behavior-based observations to determine why things occur. So it was vehicular behavior, it was tired driver, late in shift. The consequence was an accident. Failure reporting, again, I don't see it used a lot, but it's pulling standard failure classifications. And the last thing I was going to mention here is a related record. So what happened, again, this event was entered. We report the incident happened. This one we can tell because there are no related records except the investigation. It was created using the incident application. Someone came in here and reported the incident. So probably a call came in, the control desk answered, they said what happened, and they started recording the details of this particular event. If it would have came from a work order, we would have seen that related work order. And if it had any other secondary relationships, we would see those. So really all that's happened is it got reported and then an investigation was created. So we've got pretty good detail in the incident. You go to whatever level of depth of information you want to capture on the incident when you record it, and then you make a decision on what's the result. Now, I did allude to the fact that sometimes people do investigation right in the incident. So they might change the status to in progress, pending review. Again, it's all based on your business practices, but they might add a synonym status of in investigation status, and then they might add a tab here that's got some of the investigation details. So streamlining, making it simpler because they don't have those multiple disciplines that do all this. It's a singular person, and they want the application to be concise. So let's take a look at our investigation. And what I could do, I could definitely go to the investigation from here, but I'm going to just go back to the main screen just so you know where it is. So if I go to safety and quality management where we could report the incident, we can also see where the investigation occurs. So this would be all my investigation records. Again, if you were a larger organization and you had a group that just did incident investigation, this would kind of be their landing spot. This is where all their data would be. This is where they'd run KPIs and metrics. It would all be from this application. So we see that investigation. Again, we're sort of in this situation disconnected from the incident. We have full transparency of the incident, but we're our own group trying to figure out why it happened. We're probably bringing in some of the incident reporting people, or we'll at least be in contact with them, but we're managing this sort of independently. So I've got the investigation, type of investigation. Again, these are domains. You can put whatever values you want in them. Who reported it? Who's the investigation lead? We'll just put Miller as the lead on this. The investigation details, again, that's all copied over when you create an investigation from the incident. So we've got all the details. We know where it happened. We know its priority. We know who is affected. We know who reported it. We know time, date, stamp. All that information's in there. Even the sequence of events all comes over in the system so that the people investigating have the same level of context as the people who reported the incident. So review actions. This becomes a little bit different because we could standardize a list of, I guess, repeatable processes we go through when certain types of incidents happen. So I could actually create a group here for vehicular accident actions. I could create one for, spills and releases. You name it, you could categorize them correctly. And then when you select the action or the action group, you kind of get this list of actions that you need to do. And you can set ownership. So Wilson's responsible for this. The responsibilities needs to be associated by the safety team. The related documentation update needs to be managed by our document control group. And you would actually track whether they're done, whether they're completed. It would time, date, stamp, but these actions could be reviewable. And the nice thing about actions is if you're assigned an action, you don't necessarily have to have access or go into this investigation application. There is actually an operational action dashboard, and it's a dashboard where you see all your actions. So if I go here, show me all actions for Wilson, of course I'd have a save query. So when I come in here, and it would show me I've got some permit actions, I've got some actions on a management of change document, I've got some other, but I might have on an investigation some things I have to do. And I would see a relationship back to that record. I could actually go to the action source and go look at it, but I can manage my completion right from this dashboard style view. So it's a really powerful set of capabilities. Let me go back to that investigation again. Our review actions are completed in some format. We can also see kind of the main crutch of this is the after action review and analysis team. So this is really where I put my team together, who's leading it, who's facilitating. You know, I imagine us being in a boardroom, kind of going through all the documentation on, you know, the steps that led up to this, what we got from eyewitness accounts, what the operator of the vehicle that was in the accident said, and then we kind of have a mantra here: there should be no accidents in this organization. We should avoid all avoidable incidents, and this was an actually at-fault incident, so that will lead to kind of our mindset as we start to investigate this. So that all happens through the analysis tab. So multiple methodologies of analysis. You can use root cause failure analysis. You can use 5 whys, like a cause analysis, a human factor, structured root cause analysis, failure mode, cause and effect, which would be more, you know, operational or equipment related. So we just did a simple root cause failure analysis. We determined the root cause. We had a leader that kind of facilitated this and showed us how to go through an RCFA. We used whatever tool set was required to do that. We had some dates on requirements, and then we came up with 2 root causes. We realized that signals, indicators, and mirrors on vehicles just aren't as good as they could be based on OEMs. So we're going to make some modifications to our vehicles so that there is greater visibility. And then we also realized that just an overall lack of training related to driver training for our specific vehicles. So what we can do is obviously set ownership to these actions. So Wilson, you're responsible for making modifications, whatever that involves. And Miller, you're responsible for making modifications to the training. And we could leave it at that, but what I also did is you still got this create function. You've got the ability to create related records. So I could create a work order, I could create a corrective action. And what I did is when I go to look at related records, I can see that this originated from the incident, which makes sense. We saw 1176 resulted in an investigation, but we see there's 2 follow-up corrective actions. One's to update training documentation, and one's to install new auditory signals on the vehicle, which is our signal changes that we want to make. And again, these become manageable. We can assign labor, we can assign cost, we can track their status to know if they're done, because eventually we want to get to the point of seeing that the corrective actions have been applied, and then we can finally close out the investigation and resolve the incident as required by whatever internal or external authority is mandating that we complete this. So again, as I say in most of my recordings, always take what I say with a grain of salt, because it's a story. It's one way of doing things. And we all know as Maximo users, there's always more than one way to do things in Maximo. There's ways to make it more simple. There's ways to make it more streamlined. There's way to add extra details. There's automation with workflows so that we can automatically move this through your standardized business process. So all things to keep in mind as you look at this, but the key takeaway is there's an application in Maximo where we can report incidents, and there's an application in Maximo where we can investigate incidents. I thank you for your time.